Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we will be discussing about the various trustee structures available for setting up a self-managed super fund. As we all know, SMSF or self-managed super fund is a trust and it requires a trustee. Now there are two options available to decide which type of trustees you like. And we're going to go through both options and what are the drawbacks and the benefits of having a trustee type. So let's start with what are the two structures that are available. So the two structures that are available for the trustees for the self-managed super fund. One is the individual trustees, which means like a natural person. So I can be a trustee of my self-managed super fund. And the second is a corporate trustee, which means a company registered with the ASIC. So you can actually register a company, be a director and shareholder of that company, and that company acts as a trustee for the self-managed super fund. Now, what are the drawbacks and the benefits of choosing one after other? So let's start with the first one, which is the cost. When we are deciding on a trustee and it's a natural person, which means I, individual, be a trustee of the super fund, it doesn't require setup of the natural person. So the only cost that you are paying is actually setup cost for the SMSF. Whereas if you're choosing corporate trustee, you also need to set up a company as well if you don't already have one, or even if you have one, you may choose to actually have a separate company as a trustee for your SMSF, which means that you've got this setup cost for a self-managed super fund trustee or a corporate trustee. And the second cost that comes is actually annual cost, because company, you need to pay the ASIC annual fee every year. So there is a running cost for a corporate trustee as well. So when we are comparing, corporate trustee is expensive compared to being a normal individual as a trustee. The second thing comes is the ownership of the assets. When we are in a SMSF, because it's not a legal entity, it's a trustee who's a legal entity. So the ownership of the asset stays with the trustee of the SMSF. So if it's a corporate trustee, the ownership is under that company. If it's individual trustees, the ownership under the individual trustee's name, which means that if I buy a shares or I buy a block of land or it's my bank account, it's actually the trustee name as a trustee for the SMSF. There are two individual trustees, then both names actually goes in the documents. So that's the ownership of the assets. Now, when we are looking into that one, the big hurdle that we have is when there's a change in the membership. So if SMSF have two individual members at start and later point in time decide to add another member, that member need to be the trustee of the SMSF as well, because one of the requirement is all the members of the SMSF need to be the trustee of the SMSF, or all the members of the SMSF need to be the directors of the trustee company of the SMSF. Thus, if you are adding a member or one member is resigning, you have to change all the asset documents to actually reflect that change, which can be very costly, because changing a name on all the shares you held, all the bank accounts you held are very, very expensive and in that sense. Whereas if it's a corporate trustee, what you are required to do is just change the directors of the corporate trustee, which means that corporate trustee always owns the asset, and admin cost is very, very minimal there. The next one is actually when a SMSF is going for borrowings. A lot of banks or lenders don't like individual trustees when it comes to lend funds to the SMSF. They require to have the corporate trustee there, and thus it makes very easy from the lending side if you have a corporate trustee. So which means that even for the borrowing purposes, they actually like to have the corporate trustee compared to the individual trustees. The other thing is, if it's a single member fund, which means that you are the only member in your SMSF, you need to have another person be a trustee of the SMSF. So I would say SMSF can't have one individual trustee. It's a requirement that you have to have a minimum 2 individual trustees. You can have 1 corporate trustee. So which means that if you're a single member, you have to find someone else who will be the trustee of your SMSF. Now, trustee is the one who makes decision for the SMSF, which means that if it's your money, you are now trusting someone else to actually act as a trustee for your SMSF, which is sometimes not advisable, or sometimes you don't even have someone who can be that. So for a single member fund, it is very common to actually just have a corporate trustee, because you can be the only director of the company, and that means the whole control is just in your hands. When it comes to succession planning or estate planning, it is very important to think which type of trustee an SMSF have. Now, as I mentioned earlier, all the members need to be the trustees of the SMSF as well. When in future a member is of a death or incapacity of a member, a SMSF has to actually appoint another trustee there, which means that if you go back to our previous point, all the assets need to be re-registered under the new trustee name. So we had a recent situation where actually one of the member of the fund passed away. So it was a 2-member fund, husband and wife, and one of the member passed away, and they were the individual trustees. Now, either the surviving member has to find someone else to be the trustee of the fund, or they have to go through a corporate trustee structure and make a corporate trustee as a trustee of the fund. Either case, they have to amend the trust deed, they have to re-register all the assets under the new trustee's name, and which was really, really hard, especially at the time when the surviving member is actually grieving, and it's a really hard time for them. And that's the reason why it's very good to have the corporate trustee, just to make sure that if anything happens like that in future, you don't have to go through all that hassle at that time. So for estate planning, it's always the corporate trustee that's better. The other thing that comes is actually not very important, but somehow important as well, which is the ATO penalties or any compliance penalties. Now, the penalties are charged per trustee. So as I say, to be a natural person or individual trustee, you have to have at least 2 individual trustees, which means that any penalty is per trustee. So the maximum ATO penalty is $10,000, which means that if you have 2 trustees, you are paying $20,000 for the same breach that a SMSF with a corporate trustee will only pay $10,000, because it's per trustee. So 2 trustees, 10 times 2, 20,000. 1 trustee is only 10,000. As I say, not very important, because we don't want to be in that situation, but something to look at as well. So what are the things that you should be looking at when actually you are deciding whether you are going for a corporate trustee versus when you are going for the individual trustees? So the first is how many members you're going to have in the super fund. If it's a sole member, highly recommended to be a corporate trustee. What are your plans for the super fund? Are you looking to borrow? If you're going to borrow, corporate trustee is better compared to the individual trustee. Are there any changes you're expecting in the membership type in future? You need to look into that as well. And your succession planning, and also various risks that you're gonna take. So these are all things that you are looking into your strategy when you are deciding which type of structure or which trustee structure you are after. The complex the super fund, the better the corporate trustee. So the individual trustees are better when actually it's just the 2 members, and you know that there are not going to be any changes to the trustees or the members of the fund. It's a very simple super fund. No complex investments are there, and no borrowing involved. And most importantly, you want to save annual cost and the setup cost of the corporate trustee. If that's not what you are after, you are going for the borrowings, you are not sure if there will be more members coming in or not, we opt for a corporate trustee, because corporate trustee is an initial extra cost, and yes, small going forward annual cost, but it's always better to have the structure right at start. And in our experience, we have noticed that even the super funds that initially started with the individual trustees, later in time, they actually converted that to corporate trustees for one or the other reason. Yes, they have to pay the admin costs, but that's what we try always to avoid, to decide upfront what type of trust, what's your investment strategy is with your SMSF and what type of trustee structures you like. If you like more details on these structures and what we talked today, please visit our website. There's a good article on that one, and the link is in the description there. Any questions, please feel free to give us a call. Thank you, and we talk to you in our next episode.